you, Senator, and I want to thank you for highlighting this really serious issue and concern. And I also want to send my sympathies, and I know it's 10 years ago, as you said, to the parents of Tig. It doesn't matter how many years, it's still very emotional. Well, Senator, I'm taking this now on behalf of Jennifer Karen McNeill, Minister Jennifer Karen McNeill. She can't be here today, but I want to thank you for raising this really important issue. So firstly, I want to express again my deepest sympathy to all affected by the deeply troubling issues around organ retention. It is unacceptable and very distressing situation for anyone to go through, especially after having experienced the tragedy of losing a beloved child. Most post-mortem examinations are a vital part of medical practice, and it is one of the most informative investigations in medicine and can provide objective information on the cause of death, which is of value to the family of the deceased or to healthcare professionals and to other interested parties. But post-mortem examinations can provide information about the risk of inherited diseases, which might be of benefit to family members in seeking necessary care and treatment. Post-mortem examinations can provide information to improve understanding of how disease is caused, advancing medical knowledge and helping others by contributing to the fight against disease and how it can be best treated. Organs or tissues are sometimes removed and retained as part of a post-mortem examination, primarily to allow for analysis of cause of death in hospitals' post-mortem services, so this can follow a detailed information and consent process with the family. Consent process underwent significant changes and improvement following justified outrage, and that is factual, justified outrage about post-mortems and organ retention practice in Ireland. Several inquiries have addressed the controversies around organ retention, and as you said, the Dunn inquiry was established to investigate post-mortem practice and procedures in all hospitals in the state since 1970. The inquiry commenced its work in March 2001 and submitted a report to the then Minister for Health in March 2005. In May 2005, Dr. Deirdre Madden was appointed to examine the findings of the Dunn report and to provide Government with a final report on post-mortem policy and practice. This report was published in 2006, and subsequent report of a working group, also chaired by Dr. Madden, on other areas of post-mortem practice and procedures was published in November 2006. An independent audit of all retained organs in the state, which was commissioned by the HSE, was carried out by Ms. Michaela Willis, and this report was published in 2009. The HSE subsequently developed the standards and recommended practices for post-mortem examinations services and circulated these to relevant hospital staff in March 2012. The overall aim of the 2012 guidelines was to drive high-quality post-mortem examination services based on legal requirements and keeping with the best professional practice. These guidelines were recently updated to the HSE National Clinical Guidelines for Post-Mortem Examination Services in April 2023. The Human Tissue Transplantation Post-Mortem Anatomical Examination and Public Display Act 2024 was enacted in February 2024. Part of the tree deals with pathology practice and implements many of the findings of the Madden report from 2005. This will establish a new regulatory regime to ensure best practice to follow in the conduct of post-mortem examinations. The Act introduces consent provisions for non-Coronian post-mortems and sets out a clear framework for how consent is to be obtained and the information that must be given to individuals or their families when seeking such consent. The Act also provides for the regulation of the retention, storage, use, disposal and return of organs and tissues from deceased persons following all post-mortems in hospital settings, including those directed by a coroner. The Act also amends the Coroners Act 1962-2024 to address issues with regard to material removed and retained from the deceased person in a post-mortem examination directed by a coroner. This is something that families directly impacted by recent controversies have called for, and it is important that the legislation has not only acknowledged these requests but have addressed them. And also, I know I'll be coming back in, Senator, I think it would be important that you would email me on, if you wouldn't mind, all this information, and I will also have a meeting with Minister Jennifer Karen McNeill on this. Thank you.
Minister Tully, before you recommence, I'd just like to welcome the St Mary's Holy Faith School from Glasnevin, who are guests of Deputy Johnny Girk and their teachers, to the gallery. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Senator Tully.
Thank you, Cahir, and thank you, Minister. Look, in the reply there, it outlines the important changes that have taken place since, and they were required. And unfortunately, though, there was such a gap from the initial investigations and reports, which were all in the early 2000s, until the Act was passed in 2024. And, Paula lost her son, Tadhg, in that period. And had, action be taken quicker, perhaps that wouldn't have happened to her or many other families. But also, it's the fact that it's this one pathologist, and it's the question why, if he was made leave his post or was told to was fired or whatever the terminology used was, that he was allowed to carry out autopsies in other circumstances there. But as she said, she just never got the explanation or the apology, of what happened. And that's really heartbreaking for her. And I know it's because of her and other families speaking out about this issue that the legislation has been introduced, and rightly so. And it's not that anyone queries the need for autopsies and how important the information that you can glean from that on cause of death is, but it's just about the consent and the knowledge of what's happening to your loved one's body. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. And again, Senator, no words can ever make up for the distress experienced by affected families who have lost a loved one, particularly bereaved parents, in an inappropriate retention of organs only added to the family's distress and grief. But dignity and respect for parents who have experienced the loss of a child is of paramount importance. And this is why it is so important to commence the provision of Part 3 of the Human Tissue Act, which will establish a regulatory framework for the conduct of post-mortem examinations that embeds in law the idea that consent is the defining principle across activities involving human tissues. Under the Act, consent will be needed from families for arrangements relating to the burial, cremation or the return of any organ retained from a post-mortem examination. The management of any organs must be in line with the wishes of the family. And the Human Tissue Act 2024 includes a number of offences that can be prosecuted. You can be prosecuted for serious breaches of medical practice or records management. These are not intended for criminalisation for clinicals, but a balance must be struck. A culture of patient safety and quality assurance, as well as an open communication, must be at the heart of high standard health services, and it is important that we take all steps to prevent this ever happening again. And again, I will meet with you, as I said, Senator, and I will be absolutely speaking to Minister Jennifer Karen McNeill on your behalf. Thank you.